Assalamualaikum Bu Rita, mangga.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Syarifatunisa and I will be the Master of Ceremony in the Studium Generale today. The Honorable Head of Sport Education Program, Professor Dr. Amang Ma'mun, MPD. The Honorable our guest lecturer, Professor Van Hong from Bangor University, United Kingdom. The Honorable Lecturer of the Sport Education Study Program, and all participants of this Studium Generale. Welcome to the Studium Generale Sport Education Study Program, School of Postgraduate, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, with the theme of Gender Equity and Research Science in Pandemic COVID-19, What We Can Do. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all praise and thanks be to Allah Almighty for the abundance of grace and the joy that all of us can gather in this event in the good heart. And then I would like to inform you that one of our guest lecturer today, Dr. Didi, unable to attend this event because her brother in a bad condition at hospital and she had to stay with him at the moment. She also apologized for all the participants in here. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the event, please allow me to read the schedule for today. The event we will begin with the welcoming speech and also opening this program officially from Head of Sport Education Program, Professor Dr. Amang Ma'mun, MPD. And the main session, we will have presentation from our guest lecturer, Professor Van Hong from Bangor University, UK. And the session will be guided by moderator, Ms. Rita Anggorawati. The presentation will last for an hour and 30-minute question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin with the welcoming speech and also opening this program, officially from Head of Sport Education Program, Professor Dr. Amang Ma'mun, MPD. To Professor Dr. Amang, MPD, the time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Professor Van Hong, PhD, the Honorable Directors of Sport Education Study Program, and I am pleased to welcome the student. I am proud of and all the participants who attend the Zooming meeting of the Studium Generale today. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Prof. Van Hong, PhD, for attending and giving lecture on today's Studium Generale. This Studium Generale was held to answer various problems that are currently happening. Gender equality is an issue that is still being discussed throughout the world, especially when viewed from the attention of countries in the world in determining the priority of sport development and Olympic movement. In addition, until now, almost all countries in the world have been hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, which is a challenge for all of us, including academic and researchers, especially in conducting research at the master and doctoral level at the Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. The Studium Generale aims to enable all of us to understand and take part in what is happening right now. Without further ado, the Studium Generale Sport Education Study Program School of Postgraduate Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia officially open. You are welcome to join the Studium Generale and discuss with the guest lecturer, and hopefully this can be an inspiration to conduct research. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Among. Now we have come to the main session. In this session, we will have a presentation from Prof. Van Hong about the Olympic movement and gender equity. This session will be guided by Rita Anggorawati as the moderator. Rita Anggorawati is the academic director and co-founder of Indonesia Creative Education, ICEI. To Rita Anggorawati, you may guide the session.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Nisa. Hopefully you can hear my voice. Okay, so good afternoon, Pak Among, Professor Among, and then all the lecturers, Prof. Van Hong. Thank you so much for having me here. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
May peace be upon you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rita Anggorawati, and I will be serving as your moderator today. So, ladies and gentlemen, as it was mentioned by the Master of Ceremony, I would like to once again welcome you to the Studium Generale held by Sport Education Study Program, School of Postgraduate, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. The topic of today is gender equity and research trends in COVID-19 pandemic, what we can do. So in this session, like our master ceremony said, that it was expected to have two keynote speakers to share their ideas and thoughts, but unfortunately, Dr. Didi from Edith Cowan University, Australia, could not join us today as she needs to be in the hospital, accompanying her brother who is now in the critical condition. Our thoughts and pray goes with her. Hopefully everything went well. She sent you her sincere apologies for this. And ladies and gentlemen, we will use English as the medium of the language. And before we continue to the presentation, allow me to introduce our honored keynote speaker, Professor Van Hong from Bangor University. Today, he will be present the Olympic movement and gender equity. Ladies and gentlemen, for this session, we have 90 minutes. I would like to invite Professor Van Hong to present her presentation within 60 minutes. And then at the end of the session, we will still have approximately 30 minutes for discussion and question and answer. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to read her curriculum vitae. Professor Van Hong was graduated from Clyde, UK. Her expertise is in the field of historical, sociological, and cultural studies on gender and sport in contemporary China. She is a professor in Asian Studies, the Deputy Dean of Bangor College, China, and the Special Assistant to the Vice Chancellor of Internal Engagement from 2015 to 2020 at Bangor University in UK. She is appointed as the Distinguished Professor of Shanghai University of Sport and Visiting Professor of several universities in China, and also the Editor-in-Chief of the Asian Journal of Sport History and Culture and Academic Editor of the International Journal of the History of Sport in Asia, and editor of the book series Asian Studies Within and Without, published in New York. Hello, good afternoon, and I should say probably good morning, Professor Van Hong.
Okay.
So, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, it's nice to see you again. So without further ado, I would like to invite you to do the presentation. Professor Hong, the time is yours.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Share screen. Yeah. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank Professor Amon, to invite me to join you to give this lecture. And I also like to thank all of you to attend this lecture, to share, we will share the ideas of today's lecture. The topic of today's lecture is the Olympic movement and the gender equity. And it is, we prepared this lecture together with Professor Ing Henry from Loughborough University. I just wondering if I just speak, or I will give you time to do the translation.
Okay, actually, you just need to speak, Professor Van Hong.
Okay, I just speak. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, next one. Okay. Oh, well, the first question of today's lecture is this. What is a woman? Is a woman made by nature or culture? My argument is a a woman is made by nature, there are physical differences between man and a woman. But a woman's inferiority in society is made by culture and the social system. I'm going to give you two examples. One is from China, from the East, and another from the West. So I will give you an example of food binding in China. What is food binding? I will come back to this. Well, we are going to show you a picture. That is a bound fate. When a woman or girl was born, a woman or girl, and with a natural food, but then after the bonding and physical mutilation, and the fate were like this. Okay, the bountiful, I have, well, one of my books is about food binding, feminism, and freedom. I think that women's liberation, the feminists always talking about the liberation politically, economically, and also in terms of education. But my argument is that physical liberation of women's body is a prerequisite for women's freedom and the whole. So we're talking about this bound food. The bound food was euphemistically known as the golden lily or the perfumed lily or the 3 inches lily. Girls usually began to bind their feet from 4 to 5 years old of age. The toes were broken and bent under the sole of the foot, and the foot was then bound with several meters of bandages that stopped the blood circulation. So this physically restrictive process lasted 10 to 15 years. So you could think about a girl when they were very young. Here, just a picture just showing you how this process of food binding taking place. A girl, when she was only 4 to 5 years old, and she was forced to bind her feet. And look at this picture. The binding feet, when the people who helped her or forced her to bind her feet are not men or women, the mother, the grandmother, and the young girl. So the girl will bind their feet from 4 to 5 years age and then lasted for 14 or 15 years. The purpose is to bind it and then stop the blood circulation and also breaking the bones. So at the end, with this kind of a product, look at the feet. And the bound feet is not just bound their feet physically, but bound their freedom. If women or girls with this kind of feet, they will not be able to work, to go out, and to work, to get education, to work. Eventually, they don't have any freedom and they don't have any way of independence. So it's not just one girl in this situation. For the past 2,000 years in feudal China, all girls from all classes, working class, middle class, and upper class, were all with this bound feet. So physically, because of this, a bound feet we associated with security, mobility, and status. Why? Women with bound feet is a passport to a good life, to good marriage. With a good marriage, and it's supposed, the women is supposed to have a good life. So because of this, they don't have any freedom, and they have to dependent on men. And their whole life, when they were at home before their marriage, they depend on their parents, the father especially. And after marriage, they depend on their husband. And after their husband died, they depend on their sons. So they were the products of a male-dominated culture and society. So a woman or a girl was born as a girl, as a woman, but they were made physically inferior to men. And eventually, their social status in the society were regarded inferior to men because they are not strong. They have to rely on men to survive. So I think that my argument is about fate, not only about women's fate, but also their freedom and the independence. And because from this, we will see how sport and physical exercise has given women the freedom and their confidence. So women's freedom and liberation will have to start from free their bodies. And the free their bodies will have to start it from women's participation in exercise and sports. This kind of things is not this kind of a practice and social prejudice will not just happen in China. This is just one of the extreme practice of mutilate women's bodies. And in the West, something also happened. It's a corset. And women will wear this corset willingly or unwillingly, because it's also a kind of social status and security and for women to survive in the society. Women wear this corset. And the argument from the male side is that, and they have to be, it's a kind of symbol of the beauty, and it was recognized by men and by society. So with this restriction of the body, and women, of course, will not be able to, it's almost as a same condition for women in China, and they will not be able to go out and to have their independence and their freedom. They will have to rely on men to survive at home and outside home. So these two kinds of physical restriction have reflected the male-dominated society's value and practice. And I have, there are two books, and one is we're talking about the food binding, and also we look at when women, they start to play football and also to attend the Olympics and play at the Olympics, and there's a sexual liberation. So physically, if women have the physical liberation and the physical freedom and showing to the society and the whole world that women can be physically strong and same as male, and they can play the same sports as well as men. So that is a new era. It shows it's a new era for women and also reflect the progress of the society. So women's physical emancipation was a prerequisite of women's liberation as a whole. The liberation of women's bodies through physical exercise and sport were essential requirements for their wider political, cultural, and educational freedom. Women's participation in physical activities, sports competitions, and the Olympics reflected the change of culture and progress of society. So sports and the Olympics and the sports competitions have played a very important role. In my argument, I would say an essential role for women's liberation and emancipation. A history of women's participation in physical activities, sports competitions, and the Olympic Games was a history of women's struggle to have equal rights in sporting field. And now I will show you a short film. Okay. Now I'm showing you a table, and then you will see that women's participation in the Olympic Games, it is a long journey from 1896, and this form is just come to 2004 because of the limitation of the page. But you can see the change from 1896, the first modern Olympics. There's no women's participation in the Olympics, and then from the 1900, there was only very small numbers. And then when we come to the 2004, there's almost women actually participate in almost all the Olympic sports. And for women's participation, however, I don't think it's most women. Okay, sorry, it's just about there's something here. This happened not only in the Western countries, but in the East countries. There's some noticeable change for certain group of women who suppose, well, in the past, in the history, and were not attended Olympics, but now they attend the Olympics and showing the new image of women. And let me show you. Yeah.
Professor Hong, really sorry. Is there, so I just would like to confirm, is there no sounds in your video or?
And I'm also going to show you another image of Indonesia female athletes. Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, what I want to say is that, okay, next one. Women's participation in the Olympics is still in a lot of some arguments whether if women is performing as strong as men, and then there's some arguments whether she is a woman or she is a man. And so there's although we think that women's participation in the Olympics is has achieved a great success, but there are still a lot of questions and arguments on the way. But however, like the IOC president Bach has said, I firmly believe that sport is one of the most powerful platforms for promoting gender equality and empowering women and girls. So the great achievements have achieved, but there are still some resistance and some arguments on the way for women's participation in physical exercise, competitions, and the Olympics. In general, I think this is there are some arguments here. I'm just to show you here. In general, the inequality, of course, still exists in the sporting field and in the Olympics. However, people's attention focused on the numbers of female athletes in the Olympics and also women's participating in the numbers of sports in the competition and the Olympics. There's one important area we should pay much more attention to is women's leadership role in the Olympic movement. The IOC has taken this matter seriously.
Udah di mana, Bang? Udah di mana?
In 1997, the IOC has started this quota system to ask the NOC, that's National Olympic Committee, should have certain numbers or percentage of female representatives in the NOC committee. And also in 2004, some research commissioned by the IOC started. There are two major research on this topic. One is conducted in the 2004. It is called Look at the Women and Leadership in the Olympic Movement. That this report and this research was conducted by Loughborough University, and Professor In Henry leads this investigation. And following this, this research, following this research, the first research in 2004, and it is, oh, I think I've got, yeah, all right, yeah, it is. It is revealed that women are seriously underrepresented in sporting world in leadership position. And the IOC is seeking ways to improve representation of women in executive decision-making position in Olympic and international federations. Amongst the opinions is considered were the following. One, adopt a quota for women so that each such sporting body must have a minimum proportion of members from each gender, the man and woman. And two, adapt a minimum target for women to be elected to the body. Three, leave international sporting bodies to appoint the best person for the job. Please note, the difference between a quota and a target is that a quota is required. There are sanctions for not achieving your quota, whereas a target is advised goal. It is an aspiration, but there are no penalties for not achieving the target other than the disapproval of the community. And we also, when we carry on with this topic, we also need to clarify the equality and equity. Sometimes people use them together almost like they are the same, but there are some difference between those two terms. Equality means equal treatment, assumed the rights to the same social conditions. For example, salary or work conditions for both women and men. It tends to be about inputs. But equality, like today, our topic, requires eliminating all barriers to economic and political opportunities and access to social benefits, such that men and women of all ages, conditions, and positions can enjoy these opportunities and benefit from them. It tends to be about achieving outcomes. So after we clarify the terms of equality, and the target and quota, let's look at the study of the two research, and the two research. And the 2002 to 2004, normally we would call 2004 because the reports came out in 2004. And we call it study 1. And after the research, after the 2 years research, and the research has found there are some progress since 1997, when the IOC had started the quota system. And there's some progress, reasonable progress. By 2001, there were about 10,000 women were in the executive committee. However, it still looks a poor progress to the target of 20% minimum women get into the executive committee in 2005. So the results, although there's some progress were made, but the results is poor. And another disappointing result is that even when women joined the executive committee 10%, but they were only occupied positions not to be senior roles. So that is another disappointing result. And after the 2004 study, the reports made some recommendation to the IOC to improve the situation. And then following the 2004 study, there were Loughborough University was commissioned to conduct another research in 2009 and 2010. This is also conducted by Loughborough University and led by Professor Ying Henry. And this research is, the aim of this research is focused on why female members of NOC or IFS will not be elected to senior roles of president, for example, president, secretary general, and treasurer, and to develop recommendations for consideration. So we can say there's a continuity of the study of women's leadership in the Olympics. The first research identifying that now there's some progress. Women were elected to the executive committee. But the second research is try to find the reason why when they were in the committee, executive committee, but they were not in the senior roles like a president, secretary general, and treasurer. And this is numbers of female executive post holders in NOCs and NFS. And there's these are the, you can see it, right? Yeah. Okay. These are the percentages of executive committee females. And here is the number of presidents. And of course, this is the region and continents. And this is the number of presidents. And this is a number of secretary generals. And even in the Americans, we would think it's most liberal countries. But look at the percentage of women occupying the senior roles in the executive committee, and this is in Asia, and this is in Europe, and this is in Australia and New Zealand, and this is international federations. So from the numbers and the percentages, and we will say that even when women were in the executive committee and occupying the executive post position in NOCs and NFS, but they are not really in the senior roles. The report also identifying some cultural barriers, so why this kind of situation happens. There's some argument about there's several barriers. One is barrier is a cultural barriers. When they look at women and men and women, not really about the sex, but the masculinity and femininity, which will decide the leadership roles and also leadership styles, especially when women and men compete for the senior roles. So for these genetic characteristics, which are ascribed more strongly to men than women, describe primarily assertive for men, controlling and confident tendency. For example, they have the characteristics as aggressive, ambitious, dominant, forceful, independent, daring, self-confident, and competitive. In employment settings, agentic behaviors might include speaking assertively, competing for attention, influencing others, initiating activity directed to assigned tasks, and making problem-focused suggestions. However, for female, there's also characteristics of femininity, which are ascribed more strongly to women than men. They describe primarily a concern with the welfare of other people. For example, affectionate, helpful, kind, sympathetic, interpersonally sensitive, and gentle. In employment settings, with this kind of characteristics, communal behaviors might include speaking tentatively, not drawing attention to oneself, accepting others' direction, supporting and soothing others, and contributing to the solution of relational and interpersonal problems. So with this masculinity and femininity, which closely linked to male and female, it has made kind of stereotypes for men and women to be able to perform as the leadership roles. And with we have seen the problems for women to have leadership roles in the senior role and executive committee. But how might this situation be changed to allow women to gain access to significant positions of power? And this study too, which conducted in 2010, is suggested to understand the context and experience of those women who have submitted themselves to election for senior roles. For example, President, Secretary General, and Treasurer within NOCs and IFs. in effect to identify where possible the key success factors in these cases, both in terms of successful election and in relation to the performing of tasks effectively imposed. And number two is to identify policy implications for the IFs and NOCs in relation to promotion of gender equality in the leadership and the management of Olympic sport. So the first one is to identify the factors which affect women to get promotion in the senior roles. The second is how, what kind of support the committee and the society and the system will give to women and to support them to the senior roles and to achieve gender equality. And the methods, the methodology of those two studies is the questionnaire surveys. I think this might be important and interest to the PhD students, because you will always conduct your research for your thesis and also for your research projects. The methodology was used that two questionnaire surveys to all NOCs and to all recognized IFS. Apart from the questionnaire surveys, there's also in-depth interviews with 36 people. They are with female presidents, secretary generals, and where possible, treasurers of NOCs and IFs. It is a very big task because people are always busy, and also for people in this higher position, it's very difficult. And well, sometimes it needs time to make contacts and to have their to follow their schedule and to conduct the interview. And also a small number of supplementary interviews with female IOC members and members of the executives of Continental Association of NOCs. That's the methodology used for this. It is the research has identified, especially for the it is for the 2010 research, identified these 7 barriers which affect women's position to get promotion or to gain the position in the executive committee, as well as get the key position in those higher positions in these executive committees. So there's a barrier 1, barrier 2 here. Barrier 1 is lack of women identified to bring forward as candidates. Barrier 2, reluctance of female candidates themselves to put themselves forward as candidates. So there is not just a society or the male prejudice. There is also the lack of confidence of females themselves as a candidate to put themselves forward for this higher position. And the barrier 3 is a general assembly electoral dominated by male president and the secretary generals. And the barrier 4 is the lack of turnover. Because the position, there's certain positions, but once people are on that position, they would stay there almost forever. So there's a non-standing incumbents, means that few spaces for new female candidates. So therefore, there's no incentive to engage in succession planning. The barrier 5 is a negative aspects, organizational culture. So the organizational culture, if it's a traditional conservative culture, and it remains, and it also will become barriers for women's promoted to the senior roles. And the barrier 6, women elected, but not to senior roles. And well, we will see some of the examples is that women were elected in the executive committee or in the committees. However, they will either put in charge of not, for example, women's committee, and or some other committees which not in a significant will not play significant role in the committee. And the barrier 7 is women marginalized by being limited to women e-sport commission area. Like that's what I just said about it. So these 7 barriers, major barriers, were identified. What we could do, and there were some recommendations were made by the report. And now I will just give a brief introduction of the barriers and also what we are going to overcome the barriers and to achieve progress. Now, barrier 1 is the lack of women identified to bring forward as candidates. And the recommendation is that the committee or the organization should develop a list of potential candidates. For example, like the Netherlands NOC, and they did. And what they did is they balanced in terms of gender, so male and female, for consideration for posts of responsibility within the NOC or IF. And also, they will we should provide support to female candidates, especially, and they will be benefit from training. And there's a barrier 2, reluctance for female candidates to put themselves forward as candidates. Then it is suggested that we should develop seminars. This seminar is not just for one. Okay. Hello.
Okay. So thank you very much, Professor Van Hang.
Okay. Shall I continue? Okay, that's okay. The barrier 2 is a reluctance of female candidates to put themselves forward as candidates. The recommendation is adapt one of the good practice is to develop seminars.
Professor, really sorry, we cannot see your share screen. Are you stopping them or?
Oh, sorry.
Try again. Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
Okay, now we come back. Okay.
Thank
yes.
you.
All right. We just talked about the barrier 2 and also the how we overcome this barrier. And the barrier 2 is the reluctance of females themselves to put themselves forward as candidates. The recommendation is adapt a good practice in some other countries to focus on development, not just for technical competencies, but also political competence. For example, it should give women particularly how to present themselves as a candidate. It assumes that a male candidate would have this kind of quality, the confidence to present themselves and put forward themselves for those senior positions. But for female, because of we just talked about the characteristics of femininity, they're kind of reserved and they don't want to just exaggerate themselves, that kind of thing. But these seminars would give them how to present themselves publicly and to argue and to explain why they will be able to do a senior job. For barrier 3, there's a General Assembly electoral dominated by male president. Of course, normally presidents and general secretaries would be male. Most of them were male. And to overcome this kind of barriers, the suggestion is to provide incentives to foster gender balance in the electorate. For example, the International Triathlon Union has a differential funding policy for those NFs, national federations, that sending gender balanced this proposal or list, and they will be much more in favor of this kind of list with gender balanced. There were male and female on the list, much better than just one gender, only representatives to the General Assembly. So to the General Assembly, the organization or the committee would provide a list of candidates. On the list, it should be gender balanced, not as one gender only. And for barrier 4, there's identified there's a lack of turnover. Non-standing incumbents means that few spaces for new candidates, low incentive to engage in succession planning. In general, if there's only a few positions, senior positions in the organization, and if there is no limited roles or the regulation of the limitation of how many years you can be in this position, if there's no such regulation, that means it's very hard for new person, and that will include the female and male as well, to get into the higher position. So this is an aspect of good, and so what we should do is establishing limits to tenure for officers. For example, 4 years a term or 5 years a term. This is an aspect of good governance, already evident in the IOC's own approach. It would foster succession planning, which could incorporate search for nominations from both genders. So this is not just for female, that's for male as well, for the new person or young person. So it should establish limits for tenure for officers. And for barrier 5, there's a negative aspect, organizational culture. We all know that each organization has its own culture. And so it's if you are working in a positive environment, and it would make your the progress will much quicker or better or faster. So if we want to change this selective aspect in the international culture, we should develop developing audits of organizational culture. One is to identify the implicit and the explicit values and the practice of NOCs, IFs. And two, in order to evaluate how this related to features of good governance. That good governance, one of the important aspects of good governance is that gender equality. That is not just happened in the sports organizations. It happens in all organizations, especially the big organizations. And Bio 5, so women elected, but not to senior roles. And we have seen that from 1997, women were elected or women will get into some of those executive committees because there's a requirement of IOC. You got to have certain numbers of female or percentage of females in the organization and the executive committee. However, when women were elected in those committees, they were not put in the senior roles. So to overcome or to change this kind of culture, the recommendation is to introduce limited terms of office and KPIs. And that's a key performance indicators. I think that was that is now used in most of the organization. And limiting terms of office, adopting KPIs relating to the proportion of candidates from either gender, specifying the competencies, skills sought in the post holder. I guess this we all understand. And there's the final one, as women marginalized by being limited to women e-sport commission or in this area. It seems, okay, you are in the organization and you are women. Now we establish a women's committee. Now you go to deal with all these women's issues. And this actually put on the one hand, it's isolated women's issues from the big picture. On the other hand, it's also give the indication to the other people and all the system that women's issues is not that important. So to what we should do is that we should focus on equality, like I just said, not equality, but equality. And focusing solely on gender makes it easy to say this as a problem of or for women. Focusing on equality as a requirement of good governance defines this as a problem of good governance for all to concern themselves with, men and women. And to this regard, that and IOC actually has changed its the commission from the Women's Sport Commission actually to Gender Commission. So that's just show there's some progress. And also women's, the minutes of women's commission's meetings will be seen by the IOC executive committee. And it seems we from what we have said from in this lecture, from the beginning, women's body were made and inferior to men, and the women's participating in sport, in physical exercise, in competition, in the Olympics have shown that what men can do in the sports field, women can do. because the sport field is one of the important, some people say would be very important place to show the inequality between men and women because of the physical difference and because women is physically weaker than men. So that made one of the big arguments for women as a whole, their inequality in the society. And however, women have overcome for the past 100 years, overcome all those barriers, or most of the barriers, and achieved equality, especially as participating in the Olympic Games, and showing that women can do the same as men and women, the equality in the Olympic Games. However, there are still, it's not just, we say all those small, short films to show women's progress in the sports, in the Olympic Games. However, inequality is still exist in the society. And I'm going to show you one of the, this is a short film here, and then you will make your judgment how women's position in the society as a whole.
Okay, sorry. Hello, Professor Van Hong. I'm really sorry, but we cannot hear the voice of the video.
Okay.
So probably you can close it first and then try to share screen and then you tick the box underneath. So probably we can share the voice. Thank you. Okay, you can stop share first and then share the screen.
Okay, yes, yeah, me, yeah. Nice. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
No, still no voice. So probably you can stop share first and then re-share screen. But then don't forget to tick the box underneath. So you will find on the left side at the bottom, you can see the box,
Okay,
the tiny box, share the audio. Yes.
Yeah.
So it says share sound.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that shows that to achieve equity in the society, we still have a long way to go. And in particular, in the sports, that's what we are talking about in sports field, and in the Olympics, we have achieved a great progress. For example, at the London Olympics in 1908, only 1.8% of the competitors were women. However, by London 2012 Games, 44.2% of athletes were women. So this is a big progress if you look at the numbers. Today, women compete in all sports on the Olympic progress. However, as we have just looked at the women's leadership in the Olympic movement and women's role in the executive committee and the organization of NOCs, IFs, and the women's position and the women's numbers in coaches or some other areas, we still haven't achieved what we would expect to have gender equity in the sporting field. We still have we come a long way, but the journey is not over yet. Okay, I think my presentation is here. Yeah, and if you have any questions, yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Hong, for your fruitful presentation. So I learned a lot about this. And I would like to ask permission to read the short summary of your presentation in Bahasa Indonesia to assist the audience in understanding the materials before the question and answer session. So I hope you don't mind with that arrangement.
Yeah. Okay.
Baik, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, saya akan coba bacakan sedikit summary tentang materi yang tadi disampaikan oleh Profesor Van Hong. Jadi dimulai presentasi dengan kalimat bahwa seorang wanita itu diciptakan secara alami, tapi kondisi inferioritasnya dalam masyarakat sebetulnya dibuat oleh budaya dan sistem sosial. Contoh yang ekstrim yang sempat ditulis oleh Profesor Van Hong di bukunya mengenai baik, terima ini. Okay, sorry, Kamati just write me a message. Okay. So budaya ekstrim yang dicontohkan oleh negara Cina itu adalah adanya kondisi budaya ikat kaki atau foot binding yang dikaitkan dengan keamanan. Hal ini merupakan produk dari budaya dan masyarakat yang didominasi oleh laki-laki, tidak hanya mengikat kaki perempuan, tapi juga kebebasan serta kemandirian mereka. Tidak hanya terjadi di Cina, ini pun terjadi di Eropa, di mana pinggang yang kecil seolah menjadi obsesi simbol kecantikan, sehingga para gadis dan wanita menggunakan korset secara ketat. Profesor Van Hong juga menulis buku lainnya mengenai soccer, women, dan liberasi seksual selain foot binding, feminism, and freedom. Beliau berpendapat bahwa emansipasi fisik perempuan merupakan prasyarat pembebasan perempuan secara keseluruhan. Pembebasan tubuh perempuan melalui latihan fisik dan olahraga merupakan persyaratan penting bagi politik, budaya, dan pendidikan para perempuan yang lebih luas mengenai kebebasan. Dan partisipasi perempuan dalam aktivitas fisik, kompetisi olahraga, serta olimpiade sesungguhnya mencerminkan perubahan budaya dan kemajuan masyarakat. Sejarah keikutsertaan perempuan dalam kegiatan fisik, perlombaan olahraga dan olimpiade merupakan sejarah perjuangan perempuan untuk mendapatkan persamaan hak di bidang olahraga. Mengutip dari Presiden IOC Thomas Bach, Profesor Van Hong menyatakan bahwa olahraga adalah salah satu platform paling kuat untuk mempromosikan kesetaraan gender dan memberdayakan perempuan serta anak-anak gadis. Untuk menjawab isu berkenaan dengan kesetaraan gender serta peran wanita di Olimpiade, IOC memiliki beberapa strategi, diantaranya menetapkan kuota untuk atlet wanita dengan jumlah proporsi minimum dari setiap gender, kemudian mengadopsi target minimum untuk bisa berada di kepengurusan, dan juga membiarkan lembaga olahraga internasional untuk menunjuk orang terbaik sebagai perwakilan tanpa memperdulikan jenis kelaminnya. Profesor Van Hong juga menekankan adanya perbedaan mengenai equality atau persamaan gender dengan equity atau kesetaraan gender. Di equality yang ditekankan adalah perlakuan yang sama, sementara di kesetaraan gender memerlukan upaya mengurangi halangan baik kesempatan secara ekonomi maupun secara politis. Penelitian Longborough Study membuktikan bahwa sejak 2001 telah terjadi progres yang menggembirakan mengenai keberadaan perempuan dan kepemimpinan di Olimpiade. Penelitian lainnya yang ditulis oleh Eagley dan Johansson Smith tahun 2001 dengan judul The Leadership Style of Women and Men yang dimuat di Journal of Social Issue volume 57 menyebutkan adanya penghalang budaya mengenai maskulin serta feminin yang berhak menduduki posisi kepemimpinan serta pembagian tugas. Lain halnya dengan penelitian Henry dan Robinson di tahun 2010, hal ini dilakukan untuk mengetahui implikasi kebijakan wanita yang mendaftarkan diri untuk menjabat posisi senior di IF dan NOC. Penelitian ini memaparkan 7 penghalang atau barriers yang terjadi pada persoalan kesetaraan gender pada sistem elektoral serta saran alternatif pemecahannya. Di bagian kesimpulan, Profesor Van Hong menyatakan bahwa jika dibandingkan pada tahun 1908, di mana atlet perempuan hanya 1,8%, pada tahun 2012 sudah mencapai 44,2%, di mana para atlet perempuan ini bertanding di semua jenis olahraga. Profesor Van Hong menyebutkan bahwa sudah ada kemajuan, tapi perjalanan masih panjang. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we come to the question and answer session. So I would like to invite probably 3 of the audience to pose the question. Please kindly state your name and institution. Jadi saya mengundang 3 orang penanya untuk bertanya kepada Profesor Van Hong untuk sesi pertama. Untuk sesi berikutnya, jika masih ada waktu, kita akan perpanjang. So for the first session, I would like to invite 3 questions coming from the audience. Please, you can raise your hand or write down your question in the chat box. Silakan boleh diklik raise hand-nya atau menuliskan pertanyaan di kolom chat box sekiranya ada pertanyaan. Bapak Ibu sekalian. Okay, so probably they're still thinking and I just so it's really nice to see you. Okay, so having had all the presentation on the women's and the leadership, so it's really interesting for me, Professor Van Hong. Thank you for sharing this. Is there any question? So probably the committee could help me out. Is there any question coming from the audience?
Oke, baiklah Bapak Ibu, mungkin ada yang ingin bertanya terkait dengan topik yang telah disampaikan oleh Profesor Van Hong. Atau mungkin Bu Rita, saya yang bertanya.
Okay. Anira would like to ask question. Please.
Okay, hello, Professor Van Hong. It's really nice to see you again. My name is Anira, and I had a chance to read about vaccine women in the Olympic movement, and it said that in 2020 Olympic agenda, the Olympic movement strategy roadmap is reaffirm gender equality, commitments, and priorities. So in here, the IOC still use the term of equality rather than equity. Maybe you can explain why the IOC still use that term about equality than equity. And in your opinion, maybe you can say that is the IOC been successful in carrying out its agenda, like for gender equality commitments and their priorities? Thank you.
Right. I really don't know why they don't use equalities and equality. I think there are some confusion, and people really don't. I think for the academics, when we study, we actually very sensible and very careful about the terms we use. And however, I think for some people, or for majority people, they actually don't really identify the differences between equality and equality. So I have no idea why IOC don't use equality, but I could if in the future we have this opportunity to speak to the IOC officials or the media officials, we would raise this issue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe once again, I would like to ask you about what's your opinion about the 2020 Olympic agenda that they say they want to reaffirm gender equality and commitments and their priorities. Is this the IOC has been successful for carry out this agenda, or maybe it is still a long journey again for them to do this?
I think for the IOC, and the Olympic organizations, they still would like to implement some of the changes to improve the gender equality in the games. For example, I'm told that for the opening ceremony, and normally they would have just one person to hold the country's flag and to work in front of the delegation. In the past, this is only one person, but now in the Tokyo Olympics, they would ask or require to have two people, that's a man and a woman, female and male athletes, to hold the flag, to walk in front of the delegation and the open ceremony. So that's just one indication to show that the IOC is very much in favor of or promote gender equality. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Van Ho.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Anira, for raising up the question. So is there any more question coming from the audience? Okay, so Mr. Dito Dwi Cahyo, you can proceed with your question, please.
Ya, terima kasih buat kesempatannya. I am Dito, Professor. I am a coaching rugby now in Indonesia. We have issue French Rugby Federation allowing the transgender woman to play women's rugby in France. This decision goes against advice given by World Rugby. Jadi World Rugby-nya tidak menyetujui hal itu, tapi rugby Prancisnya menyetujui untuk transgender woman main rugby bersama perempuan. Jadi jadi pertanyaannya adalah apa yang dibikin oleh profesor dengan keadaan seperti ini? Bahwa sekarang
ya, Mas Dito boleh diulang yang menyetujui siapa tadi?
Rugby Prancisnya.
So rugby, okay. So Francis rugby,
ya,
they agree with the transgender to play.
Yeah, but the
Yang
World
tidak
Rugby,
yeah. Okay,
but the World Rugby is not allowed. So ya pendapatnya seperti apa? Karena kita sudah tahu bahwa dari biologisnya jauh berbeda seperti itu. Jadi hal ini.
Okay, so what do you think, Professor Van Hong, about this condition? So
I didn't get the question. Sorry.
Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, so please kindly clarify because I'm not quite catch up the question. But then it's about the rugby, and then so there are two sides that one is agree that the transgender could play in the women's, but then the other side they did not allow the transgender to play as the woman athletes. So what do you think about these issues?
Who is not allowed women to play rugby?
No, the transgender to play as women athletes. So there are two perspectives on letting the transgender. Sorry, yes. So the World Rugby allowed the transgender to play as the woman athlete in the group, but then the French rugby is not allowing. So what do you think about this?
That is a very tricky question. Yeah, that's a very tricky question. It's not just about women or transgender play rugby. It is actually in all other and sports events. So I have, to be honest, I have no opinion on this. I really don't have opinion on this. I think the sports organization like international federations and also the Olympic, the IOCs, they have a lot of experts on ethics and also lawyers there. I think at the moment they are still arguing about this issue. But for me, to be honest with you, I have no opinion on this matter.
Oke, so thank you, Profesor Van Hong. Jadi Mas Dito, Profesor Van Hong tidak bersedia untuk menyatakan opininya untuk hal ini karena memang di tataran dunia pun ini memang masih menjadi perdebatan yang panjang. Dan secara personal, Profesor Van Hong menyatakan tidak bersedia untuk menyatakan pendapatnya mengenai apakah seorang transgender itu bisa dikategorikan atau masuk bermain menjadi anggota dari klub wanita. Begitu ya Mas Dito ya. So another one question, so this one is going to be our last because we are going to end at 15:30. So the question is coming from Eka Madia. So the question is, how is the strategy to level up the talents of the women in the suburb area to become good athletes so we can provide or increase the numbers of women's athletes. So do you have any suggestion?
In terms of provide support to female athletes, I think the policy is important. We should make the policy makers aware that they should provide more support in terms of a policy to women's or girls participating in physical exercise and sports events, and also from a younger age, for example, in schools, from secondary schools and to the universities, if possible. And they should have a special policy, I think, to support women's participation and the grassroots. And then with that, if we have that kind of policy and to develop the talents of the young girls and the female athletes, we will be able to train them and on the higher level. And then at the end, they will provide a role model in sports for all the girls and for female gender. And then there will be a role model for the whole society because with female athletes, especially the successful female athletes, are the inspiration for all the society, and not only just women, but men as well. It also reflects the progress, the social progress, and the culture change of this whole society. So I think the policymakers should be aware of the importance of supporting female and young girls' participation in sports.
Okay, so thank you. Jadi kalau menurut Profesor Van Hong yang lebih perlu untuk dikedepankan untuk menjadi strategi dan cara meningkatkan minat dan bakat, justru kita perlu membangun kesadaran para pembuat kebijakan untuk membuat suatu kebijakan mengenai pentingnya olahraga, baik itu laki maupun perempuan, tapi jika memang yang dibutuhkan adalah perempuan, maka kemudian kebijakan itulah yang perlu dibuat terlebih dahulu untuk kemudian diaplikasikan serta diadaptasi di setiap daerah, sehingga nantinya akan terbentuk adanya para role model atau contoh-contoh atlet-atlet perempuan yang sukses yang bisa menjadi inspirator bagi para perempuan, meskipun tidak hanya untuk perempuan, bisa juga untuk laki-laki, agar mereka juga tertarik untuk menggeluti bidang olahraga yang ingin dicapai di daerah tersebut. Mudah-mudahan bisa menjawab. So, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this session. Once again, I would like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to Professor Van Hong for your concise and fruitful presentation. It's still early in the morning, right there? So probably.
Yes. Yeah.
so
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your willingness to be with us. It's been an honor to having you, and it's great to see you in a very good shape.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
So probably I'm going to return the session to the Master of Ceremony. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Miss Rita, and also thank you to our guest lecturer, Professor Van Hong, for such a great presentation, and may we all get new knowledge. And then this is the end of today's Studium Generale. Thank you for participating today, and wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Is there any group pictures?
Thank you,
please, MC?
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, please turn on the camera. We will take a picture.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's it. I think it's
1, 2, 3.
okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Van Hong and Miss Rita, of course.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So it is our pleasure. Thank you so much. Permission to leave? Thank you.
Okay.
I'll see you again next time. Stay
Thank
safe,
you.
everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Oke, silahkan untuk partisipan bisa mengisi absennya terlebih dahulu.